for the next part of this evening, we do have an awards presentation which we'd like to do. But first, we have our keynote speaker for this evening. Please do give a very warm welcome all the way from Norway to Helge Haldorsen, the 2015 SPE President.
So, fit like everybody. Did I say that right? Yeah. It's getting quite late in the evening, so this is going to be rough to keep you awake, but I'll do my best. So if we can have the... Oh, there we go. So I called my talk Your History, from which we heard quite a lot tonight. That's our heritage in SPE. You have done so much, to get us where we are. But also I have a subtitle, and now we need you to invent ENP 2.0. Because as you know, there's a Scot almost behind everything that has been invented on this planet, right? It's unbelievable. I did research, I'll show you. So that's the wrapping of what I'm going to talk about. And here's the outline. I'm a history buff, so I have to start a few minutes with history. And then I'm going to honor you and show you again how you have been flying in front of the offshore V, breaking the wind for everybody else. Then together we'll look at the outlook for energy, not just oil and gas, but the rest of energy. And then visit the challenges we have, and then what is ENP 2.0. And then I'm going to end with a Spanish theme, and I can say it's Mexico, because they're opening this week. So that's why I don't call it conclusions. It's more intelligent sounding. Reflexiones finales, right? But my history side then, what happened on this day in history? And this is the same as when the Brent was discovered, right, in 1971. But on this very day, Apollo 15, the fourth moon landing, came back to the planet, right? So that's pretty extraordinary. And for anything that happens in science, there's some person who said this is not possible. And many people said this was not possible, but I picked this one. I'm picking on an American, this one. He's a very famous inventor, and this is what he said. We cannot do this, but then we did, right? But if you go back 15,000 years on this planet, there was nothing more high-tech than this. Anywhere. Not in Aberdeen, not in the US. This was it, right? This was as high-tech as you could be anywhere on the planet, and that is the truth. And then people were sitting around the fire saying, what if we could go to the moon, right? Would that be amazing or what? And they say, you had too much whiskey. We can't do that. That's impossible. This is all we have, right? And then here we go, when was it? July 21, 1969, one small step, you know the quote, right? And why did that happen? It happened because, thousands of generations said, what if, as we heard in the panel, why not, as we heard in the panel, and then how can we do it? And here you have the Wood report and all the rest of it. So that's what took us from this to that, and I think this sums up mankind when it comes to technology. It's amazing what we can do. We also see that in other things, in politics and human relations. Look at everything blowing up around us. But when it comes to technology, it's amazing what we can do. So I think you'll agree with me that it took leadership. In the case of the US, it also took 3 Sputnik moments, right? With somebody else doing it first. And I checked with the experts on my table, and maybe we compare a Sputnik moment with a dry well. And I think there were many dry wells before the first one was found. But we had leadership and tenacity, so we continued. It took a vision and it took focus, just like the panel said earlier today, we need now, in the UK. And it took the right stuff. Remember that movie? And they did it. And I think also we couldn't have done it if it wasn't for STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. Because it takes a lot of that to go to the moon, right? So together then they erased the of this impossible of going to the moon. Then I thought, this is 1964. We're celebrating 40 years now, right? And then I remember myself how ridiculous I looked, right? Okay. So, okay, how many of you fess up you had these horrible pants, right? I apologize for you over there, you can't quite see it, but you remember what it looked like. So I'm going to talk about erasing imps, but in this case, please, can we not go back to this type of pants, right? So then I checked the politics. What happened in 74? Of course, the OPEC embargo took the oil price up quite a notch, but it ended in 74. And that reminds us how important it is to have non-OPEC oil, so we don't get strangled by enormous oil prices, right? And this is where you come in. At the time, we were 4 billion people. Now we're 7.2 billion people. So we've added 3 China since 1974. Is that amazing? And then Nixon said, I am not the crook. And then he was, right, I guess. Yeah. And then 2 shows started in America, The Price is Right, and of course then we think of the oil price, and it never is right. And then Happy Days, which aren't always happy either, and we've seen that in the North Sea. And I will not talk a lot about HSE tonight, right? But maybe that's the most important takeaway. That is the HSE part. The only way we can have happy days in terms of earning enough, cutting cost, is if we do it in a safe manner, right? And then ABBA had a top single this year, as they had most years in the 70s. And I think we heard from the panel, it's still money, money, money. And then finally, and I'm going to pursue that a bit, Charles Lindbergh died. What does that have to do with anything, you ask? Well, he was an instant hero because he flew first across the Atlantic from New York to Paris. We cannot remember the headlines, but it looked like this. And you still wonder, what does that have to do with anything? Until you read this. And this is a little sad, right? Because he's a hero for many of us. He has temperature named after him. There wasn't any more brilliant than him, I think, in the UK at the time. And he said, it just isn't possible. You cannot fly. And then you had the Wright brothers who disagreed. They were bicycle repairmen, but they said, why not? And then they erased the im in that impossible, right? So that im is gone, but not if we don't have oil, right? Then we still can't fly anywhere. So that gets back to us. So I'm almost done with history now. How many of you have seen this book? This is the one that really amazed me, right? So I could have 14 pages of Scots inventing stuff, right? The steam engine, the tire, the bicycle, it goes on and on. And the one I picked was the guy behind penicillin. He was from Scotland, Ayrshire, and he was born yesterday in 1881. And even on the £5 note in Scotland, there is a picture of him, right? So the Scots really have invented everything. And I know there are geoscientists here, so I had to include. They will know Lyell and Sedgwick, right? Very famous people. They are so famous that an even more famous guy said this about Mr. Lyell. And if there ever was a compliment to a scientist, you know, this was pretty big, coming from Darwin. So much for history. Here you have, it's hard to see, but you have the UK, and then you have Norway already in snow. It feels like that. It's like this all the year. And then, of course, the big question at the time, is there any oil here, right? On both sides, really. And then some companies flew in front of the V to find out. And that was Amoco, BP, and Shell. And as we heard already, that paid off in Montrose and in 40s, and then in 71, when we went to the moon, we also found Brent. And they were then flying in front in many ways, but this sentence contains a lot. I think they were pioneering developments. It was the first serial number 001 for so many things in harsh environments, and I feel that you really broke the wind for so many, and particularly for Norway, and later West Africa, and what have you, all the deep water provinces. Because you kind of did it earlier, right? The blue is the UK curve, and then you sent over all your good SPE papers and conferences and shared it with Norway, and then we got the hang of it, right? And then we built up. And now you're declining a little before us, and we heard from the panel what it takes to do well in a declining situation, and now we can learn from that. So again, you kind of share and make us better. But not just Norway. Via SPE, as we heard earlier today, you shared this globally, and you made everybody better. So you kind of became the rising tide that lifted so many boats globally. I remember in Norway, we had all these Americans come, right? So this is on the street of Aberdeen, having to explain a big belt buckle with Bob on it, remember? And they came and they helped us get going, build up the industry. And looking at the situation now, I think the panel basically discussed this so well. You have a nation on decline. We heard that this doesn't have to happen. It can maybe do something else. We talked about commissioning, maybe costing 30 billion pounds going forward. And I don't think I have to belabor this point very much, but we have recovered then 40 billion barrels since '69, and there's a lot more to come, but there's a range. And how much is to come is a function of what I felt the panel talked so well about. So I don't think I will go through that list again, except maybe stressing this need for innovation 2.0 and the next generation joining the industry. And then we need you now to do the erasing of the IMS for what is impossible so far. So here we have Aberdeen, and we have SPE Aberdeen erasing impossible things and sharing it with the world. So now we're going to do a Jeopardy. I don't know, do they show that here in Scotland? Yeah. It's a show where you get the answer, and then you have to guess what is the question. So this is the answer. There are more than 9 billion people. 60% of us live in cities. 3 to 4 times as rich. We need a lot more energy. So, what is the question? And then if I'm lucky, if this works now. Any suggestions, anyone? Good guess. He said, what is 2030? But it is, what is 2040? So you don't get the Mercedes, you get the Toyota. Yeah. So we just passed then 7 billion people. In 2040, we're going to be 9 billion people. We're going to add another India and China to where we are now, which is amazing. But I think now we should take a moment to praise ourselves. Like. So what do we like? Every day, you and your companies team up and produce 92 million barrels a day, every single day, right? In addition, you team up and produce 350 billion cubic feet of gas. And that is very unbelievable. And I think, as I said before, the way you have shared your competency, breaking the wind for everybody else in harsh offshore environments, you have a lot of praise to be given for that. Looking forward then, what's going to happen to 2040, say? You know, Shell, BP, EIA, McKinsey, everybody's forecasting what is the shape of energy to come. So I pick Exxon tonight, and let's look at 2040. And we see then, in 2040, solar, wind, and biofuel, which we, of course, want to work as much as they can, but they're still only covering less than 5% of global energy demand, right? That's what, and to me, that is almost amazing after all the effort that we have. If you look at oil and gas, I'm also surprised by that. Look how they're king still in 2040. And Shell's forecast actually goes to 2060, and even then, you know, they're still kings in 2060, if you believe that survey. So the bottom line on this is that we need all of them. And then when it comes to oil and gas, kids don't want to take STEM because it's kind of an industry going into the sunset. Well, it's a growth industry for the next generation. Statoil's Mariner field will produce the next 30 years, everybody, right? So that's not a sunset industry. That's just starting now. So I think this message kind of doesn't come across always the way it should. Now we have 800 million cars. In 2040, we're going to have almost 2 billion cars as China and India increase the middle class. And they need a lot more oil. So I mentioned that right now. We use 92 million barrels a day. And according to Exxon, if you believe them, we need 115 million barrels a day in 2040. And where is that new oil coming from? It's quite difficult type of oil compared to where we have. And the natural decline of this stuff makes even this very difficult to sustain. And if you look at the numbers, we need $1 trillion per year, 700 to CapEx, 300 to OpEx and exploration, and we have to drill 83,000 wells every year to make this happen. 80,000 onshore and 3,000 offshore. So that's quite a job, everybody, isn't it? I don't think we're going to run out of oil ever. But we're already running out of cheap and easy oil. So this is just going to be harder to deliver to 2040. Let's talk about the situation for the industry for a second. We have an oil price, which is some people think are quite good. Some believe it will go down as the oil revolution onshore spreads. But what we agree on also is that cost is going up. And when you have those two curves happening, this is what happened to margins, right? This is what happens to returns. And if you sum it up then, since 2001, cost by a factor of 4, production almost didn't move. You don't get any bang for the buck anymore, right? Oil price up by a factor of 3, returns down by 30%. Investors, this is not good enough, everybody. Why should we invest in you? Look at that bad return you have, right? And this is really a recent plot that I hadn't seen before. I'll take you through it. So the yellow is the oil price, hovering about 110 at the moment. And this is showing then the return on average capital employed for suppliers and for operators. And if you look at the situation now, we used to be kind of a 20% return business, but now both of us are heading for 10, right? And this is why the investors are saying, why should we keep investing in you? The return just is not good enough. So in space language, that is, Houston, we have a problem. And we heard from the panel, it also works here. Aberdeen, we have a problem, right? So what can we do? We visited Darwin a little earlier, and he kind of has the recipe that we have to adapt, right? He studied birds on the Galapagos, and he saw that when flowers became deeper, if you had a short beak, you did not catch the nectar. So you had to develop a beak 2.0, or you were finished, right? So that's what we have to do now. We have to adapt, and that's what the panel talked about. How can we develop? But we don't have millions of years, right, like they had on Galapagos. We have to do it quicker. So if we visit our industry, of course, first we explore, and we need the incentive from the regulator to explore more. Then we appraise, and we have to do that sufficiently to come up with enough data to predict what will happen from our field. I think of a field development as a Rubik's Cube. How many wells? What recovery mechanism? What should we do? And then we do it, offshore and onshore. We send it off in a pipeline or a train. Then we sell the oil and generate money. Then we get the shareholder value going up, we hope, although that does look dodgy at the moment. And then we use retained earnings for more exploration and R&D. So this, in a nutshell, is the industry that we're in. And we have to do it smarter. We have to do it safer. I already talked about that, the license to operate, how important that is. We have to do it faster, and we have to do it cheaper, down the cost, more sustainable than in the past. And we have to do it in a way that they are cheering on the stock exchange, wanting to invest in us. So that's the challenge facing SPE and the industry at the moment. But how do you do something better? Well, then you have to imagine a better way, right? So this becomes a challenge in imagination, and maybe a failure in imagination if we can't do it. So you can't come up with a 2.0 of anything unless you think, I'm going to do it this way instead of that way. And that's what you have, the Wood report and all the other stuff going on. So this is called basically innovation. And if you look at investors, they're saying, oil companies have to stop thinking they're so special. Look at your departments, look at your costs, look at the strategy department and this and that, adding up to billions of pounds. You have to think of yourself more as a high-tech, safe and sustainable manufacturing operation. You have to incrementally become better in everything you do in a safe way. And then every once in a while you have to introduce new disruptive technology, like the Fosbury flop in the high jump, so everybody jumps higher because of a new way of doing it. You have to do this all the time. Standardize, repeat, relentless improvement, supply chain, and what have you. There's something to it, isn't it? I'm defensive when I see stuff like that, but there's something to it. Have you been to an F1? Have you seen how 28 people have trained to do so many things in 6 seconds? This is a little bit how we have to become as an industry, I think. You don't think about departments. It has to be safe. Nobody gets in the way of each other. this is kind of maybe the manufacturing into which you introduce a disruptive technology every once in a while. And I think when it comes to the wells, there's a lot we can do with big data and what have you, and also with improved oil recovery. There's a lot we can come up with, I think, in addition to what we do now that will improve things for us, increase recovery factors. And then I thought I need an example of a new business model. So let's say we fly out over the North Sea and we look down and we have a rig. And you know, a rig today, maybe the rig is $600,000. Supply boats and helicopters, if you add it all up, it could quickly, in the Gulf of Mexico at least, be $1.2 to $1.3 million per day. And to drill a well here, I don't know, but in GUM, it can easily be 100 days or 200 days. So $100 to $200 million. If you're unlucky, it takes a year, almost $400 million, right? So what can we do? What type of collaboration 2.0 can we come up with to do this in a different way with the business model? So I thought, what if Transocean didn't charge 600? They charged only 300. Then I can drill twice as many wells with the same budget. But then they want a reward, right? Each time BP has a hit, they want a chunk of the value. But maybe that's better for both of us, right? So I think we also have to rethink maybe the whole business model and challenge the concepts and how we think. The drawback with this is that Transocean then would think, how do I know what prospect to join BP in? And to find that out, I need a big organization, and then you lost all the earnings of efficiency, right? So anyway, but I think we also have to challenge the business models that we have currently to do better. Now, I compare SPE to Niagara Falls. Think of that as water being books and conferences and papers you should have read, but you don't have time to read it. So you need somebody to have a sieve under all this information that comes every day and collect all the drilling information, reservoir engineering, logging, HSE, and so on, and serve it to you. And of course, that is what SPE is doing. Serving information, creating that network, the volunteering, the force for good. This is what we do in SPE. So in a nutshell, we're 124,000 members on a mission to share in all these countries and all these sections and student chapters, right? And I think we're very proud of what we do there. Now, becoming the president of SPE, I see many opportunities that we can become SPE 2.0. But I want you to help tell me what is the shape of SPE 2.0. How can we harness this enormous connectivity that we have around the world? Everybody has the internet. We can make groups. You have social media. You know, what can we do that we're not doing now that will serve you as members better? One thought I had was that we can make quick networks, that if he's working on something, he'd like to connect up, kind of like eharmony.com, but we're not dating. We're looking for people doing the same as we do. And then you have that network for 2 weeks, and then you cancel it because you got all the expertise in the world to help you. But anytime you have any idea how you would like to see SPE evolve, adapt, stay relevant, give you a good value proposition, you know, please say it, because we need that input, you know, to adapt and to be better than we are. I said I would mention Mexico. I think this week they will vote in all the secondary laws, and Mexico will actually open for business soon. And if you look at what Pemex is saying, if you believe that, of course the yet to find in deep water is very, very high. And onshore, you know, it also ranks at the moment, before you check it out, very high. So I think that, you know, the basis that you have here will come to tremendous use when Mexico opens. And I think maybe in 2015 to 2020, you'll see 10 to 20 new operators in deep water in Mexico, and they could benefit enormously from the export of the Aberdeen technology and the skills that you have here. And here's the president saying, opening soon. And he is also saying that the first round most likely will be in the middle of 2015. So this is very imminent. This is happening now. This is a pretty tectonic event for the industry. And who would have thought this just a short time ago, that they were able to hold hands, agree, and then open up for IOCs and independents like that. So they erased that in. So summing up then what it takes to be successful in energy, you have to be successful not in 3D, but in 4E, I think. Supply has to meet demand, but it has to be economic, and we have to do it better and better when it comes to the environmental footprint. But there's one more E, and that is the STEM, that's the education. So I think to be successful, we have to navigate energy, not just in that energy supply demand, but in 4E. That's the challenge that we have. Now the rest of my slides I'm going to use to lift you up and call you my hero. So I already said that you erased many IMS by flying first in the V. And I used to be a practicing reservoir engineer, so I know this is true. I have benefited from your papers that you have written. So maybe this section is the best global section in SPE. I had to add a question mark because I can't tell, but maybe you are. You are a force for good. I heard from the board yesterday all that you do in the local community and how you engage. You have a huge membership. You have a strong and diverse group of members. You're very focused on young professionals. And you have a great value proposition for the local community, right? And you have a strong pusher of STEM in many of the people I met. And you're respected and admired. And now your next challenge then is to share ENP 2.0 with the world. So we salute you and say happy 40. And I've worked a lot, but look what's in the middle. Yeah. So I'm almost done now, but here we have Aberdeen again, and I truly am impressed when I hear how you have engaged. So now I want you to lean back and think about your career, what you have done, all the volunteering, all the force for good that you have done. Thank you very much, everybody.
Can I ask you to stay on, Steve?